not every place of worship in Greenford survived the war. The Baptist church was destroyed by a direct hit, but its congregation pinned a note to the door of the ruin, declaring that the church is down, but we are not. Another survivor was Greenford's Salvation Army Hall. Like Holy Cross, it had also been a new build to accommodate the fast-growing community. In wartime, the Salvationists really were the church militant on the home front. The enemies of this army were loneliness and despair, and their weapons were practical, social and spiritual support in the form of tea, fellowship and music.
My husband was Aubrey James Alfred Creasy, and we got married in Greenford Hall on a Boxing Day 1941. He had a couple of days off and then he had to go back, and it was 4 months later when we got together again, and then we had the photos taken, the photo in our uniform. The white strap is what the Salvation Army calls a white wedding. And that's what I had. I wanted to be a full Salvationist, and I wanted to be a loving person for Christ. Oh, he was a great man. We never argued, hardly at all. Well, I don't think we did. We just seemed to fall in one another's ways, that's the truth. He was the Sergeant Major of Greenford Corps for quite a number of years. And when you're a bandsman, you have a commission and you live up to that. We wanted to serve God, and we did that. Different ways. I never played an instrument. When he come to Greenford, he played the drum for a little while, and then he asked if he could try an instrument, and he tried the instrument, and that's how we went on, right until the passing away of him. Oh, it means a lot, playing carols and that. I even asked the other year for our 1 or 2 bands people to come and play at my front door because I couldn't get out to get to them, and they come and did it. Christmas is the birth of Christ, and Christ is with us all the time.
My parents had a hardware shop in South Ealing, a western suburb of London. My 2 older brothers were called up to the forces, but prior to that, I'd been one of the evacuees. And I guess I can remember 1939 and 1940 particularly well due to the traumatic circumstances. On Christmas morning, I can clearly remember receiving, among other things, a box of dominoes. And it's very nostalgic, they're all there, to think that I last played with those 73 years ago. I'm totally intrigued by the inscription inside the cover, which I obviously didn't look after very well. Quite tatty. To Roy, with love from Dad, 3 kisses. Now in those days, men didn't show emotion or sentiment. I guess Dad's stiff upper lip wobbled a little bit.
London Inferno, havoc wrought by mass night raids. This is total war now, stripped of all pretense.
1940 I can remember vividly, the height of the Blitz. I came home, I guess, after 9 months, when many evacuees were coming home. On Christmas Eve, it was uncannily quiet. All the shelters arrived at the normal time, early evening, expecting normality. Got to be a raid. It was every night. The evening dragged on. No sirens. Nothing. Unbeknown to us, there was an unofficial cessation of bombing by both sides until the 27th. But what's going on? We didn't know that. But finally everybody went to bed and we had the first peaceful night's sleep for months. Even at that young age, I could appreciate that people's Christian faith was very strong. Even in the darkest days of 1940, when possibly all seemed lost. The Battle of Britain was being fought overhead. And yet, people were still wholeheartedly the Christian faith. We were opposed to an evil tyranny, but with right on our side and the will of God, we will prevail.
In December 1943, we had a telegram which told Mummy that my father had been wounded, and presumably we didn't know how serious this was or anything. He was being taken back to hospital in the Mediterranean theatre of war, which we discovered was back in Egypt. that Christmas must have been really, really dreadful for my mother. How Mum really coped, I'm not quite sure. She loved him desperately, and it must have been very, very difficult for her. As now, when anything happens, you make sure that the children think it's completely as normal. We knew Dad had obviously been wounded, but we didn't know. That was the awful thing, I think, that we didn't know how seriously. You had no indication whatsoever. I was a real daddy's girl. I was so close to him. I missed him dreadfully. He was so loving. Yes, he was an absolutely brilliant dad. Luckily, he'd only been wounded in the finger, shrapnel I think it was, so he was able to write. In each of his letters that were written around about Christmas time, you can read into it that he would say each time, "I miss Christmas and not seeing you." It must have been dreadful for him. Dreadful. I know Dad particularly had a very deep faith, very deep. And I think that would have sustained him when he went away. It makes you realise that faith must have carried a lot of them through the war, definitely.
God bless Mummy and Daddy and Frank, Nana and Grandad, and all my aunts and uncles.
I mean, we were taught prayers, of course, as children. And I do remember that I especially had a little prayer. It's not a long one because it was cold up in the bedroom. And I said that every night.
And God bless all the soldiers, sailors and airmen, and all the men and women who are fighting for freedom. Amen.